Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor Masterclass. This is a platform where we learn from the best. These individuals are pioneers and trailblazers whose vision, leadership, entrepreneurship, and management provides teaching moments and inspiration. Joining us today is Nigel Chanakira, an economist, a banker, mentor, and personal coach. Enjoy this masterclass.
My name is Nigel Muranganwa Kudzai Chanakira, and this is my masterclass. I've had a phenomenal life, a truly blessed life in terms of experience and exposure. And if I was to talk about the highlights of my life, I guess it was finding myself in God, in determining who I want to be. I think that was a pivotal point in terms of my studies and choice of degree, because I knew I was going to commit the rest of my life to an area of study which I wanted to master, and then that would be the foundation towards self-actualization. So I think a key point in my life was choosing my degree program. Ideally, I wanted to be an accountant because I wanted something to do with money. And then I discovered the world of economics, which was really the study of how people behave within economies and what actually then drives them. So within that study, I then found my passion at the time, which was money and banking. They say one of the world's seventh wonders is compound interest. And if you know what I'm talking about, that means, essentially money being able to grow not in a step-by-step way, but in a multiplicative way, and increasingly so. And so that discovery for me that money does not sleep really thrust me into banking. And that was a new world of wonder for me. And so I would say that starting out in the study of economics, and then that allowing me to explore the area of money and banking became a pivotal moment. And then came the opportunity to actually work for a leading banker as an economist and learn how to manipulate markets and also learn how markets actually work, and in the process be able to make money from financial and capital markets. That was an amazing period for me. I then move on to the next point. I think the entrepreneurial years of my life, those were a highlight. And that began actually with Empretech, an entrepreneurial development school that was set up by the United Nations in Zimbabwe. Interestingly, there are only something like 28 of these, and Zimbabwe was chosen as one of the countries that would have Empretech, and attending that was just an eye-opener and a turning point in my life. Then I knew I was cut out to be an entrepreneur. They taught me the 10 personal entrepreneurial competencies. And, for me, that was very, very strategic to know what I was good at and what I was not good at. And so that thrust me in the world of entrepreneurship, marked off, of course, by the setting up of Kingdom Securities Holdings Limited. And as they would say, the rest is history. So my first job was actually handed to me in the sense that I didn't have to apply. The Reserve Bank at the time hired anybody who got a first-class degree or an upper second-class degree, because those were rare in our days. And so I was offered a job as a junior economist after having graduated from the University of Zimbabwe with an upper second-class economics degree. The job was interesting in that it allowed me to pursue my master's program whilst I was still a research analyst, as it were, in the public finance department of the central bank. That job allowed me to also study the treasury and debt market for the government of Zimbabwe. They were issuing treasury bills and government stocks. And I got to know the who's who in that market. That then opened the door for me to move on to my second job. And I went to work for the guy who I thought was the smartest banker in that arena, Charles Gurney, who ran Bard Discount House. So I worked in there for about 5 years under Charles. Charles was a first-class business studies graduate, and he loved to dabble with economics, making sense of that, and then trying to make money out of that. And so I served Charles for 5 years, initially as an investment analyst, a trainee, and that taught me fund management. And I was able to become the youngest director ever in a financial services company. I became a director at 24, which was quite startling for many people. I worked for them for 5 years before I went to Empretech, the entrepreneurial school that I made reference to earlier on. That job, I think, at Bard Discount House just taught me how to make money. And so I wanted to then make money for myself and my family along with my business partners. So I then moved from Bard to set up Kingdom Securities Holdings Limited. So apart from compound interest, what we were doing was we were running a discount house, which in a traditional sense stood between, it was a banking institution that stood between the central bank and all the other financial institutions. We settled the market, and so to settle the market, we either sold assets to the banks that were in surplus or lent money to the banks that were in deficit. So they could either borrow money or we could lend them money. The other way in which they could access money to cover their shortage was to sell financial assets to us. So we were always in the market ready to price or discount the price of assets that had a maturity date. And so financial trading of fixed income securities became my forte. That became the arena in which I dabbled. I learned to model the prices of fixed income financial assets, those being treasury bills issued by government, long-term government stock, bankers' acceptances that were issued by commercial and merchant banks, and instruments known as negotiable certificates of deposits. At that time, I must say, we had a very strong secondary market for financial instruments, which sadly is not the case today. And this is something which I think the authorities need to look at very seriously to see how they can promote the trading of fixed income securities. The benefit of having fixed income securities is promoting investments and savings on the part of anybody who thinks of investing. And this may range from high net worth individuals who can buy a treasury bill depending on the minimum denomination that is issued. Those same high net worth individuals can also buy government stock. And normally the rate of interest or the rate of return would be higher than the inflation rate. And so they would tend to benefit in terms of semi-annual interest streams that are paid out, half yearly from the date of issuance of that financial instrument. So all these are then also traded by all your financial institutions, those being banks, insurance companies, pension funds, and they tend, of course, to want to buy assets that match the liabilities that they would have in terms of either insurance policy holders or, pensioners upon retirement. So that is one way in which you can actually make money in the banking sector, by trading these very instruments. You can also make money by managing portfolios and switching or swapping assets, because the different players at different points in time would want to meet or match their forecasts. They normally would run a portfolio that has forecasted income streams, or they have forecasted cash flows that they want to dispense with, and so they are buying assets in buckets that actually match their liabilities. And this is the fascination, of course, that I had as a youngster and a young banker, to be able to actually see how markets are trending, see how interest rate policies are being formed, and what impact those interest rates will have on the prices of the various assets that are traded in the money and capital markets. I think as an adjunct to that, we also have the share market, which is the equities, and the equities themselves. The share prices tend to move up and down in concert with economic developments. If a particular sector is doing well, the demand increases for those equities in particular. If an industry is doing badly, of course, the prices of those assets are nailed. And so to be a young investment banker looking at all those screens in terms of price movements or volatility was an incredible fascination for me at the time. And to arbitrage between the markets and make money, to me was just a lot of fun. And to cap it all, I watched the movie Wall Street, where there were these smart investment bankers on Wall Street. So, after completing a 5-year stint with Bard Discount House and learning all there was to learn about making money through financial markets, I then figured it was time to move on. And that was really prompted by Empretech. That entrepreneurial school just set me ablaze in terms of what I could potentially achieve as an investment banker. Not working for somebody else, but working for myself, my family, and my stakeholders. So at the time, we had a pioneering group of individuals, Nick Vingirai and Gibson Muringai. These two had actually served at Bard Discount House as my seniors. And so when they left, I kind of slotted into their role, and hence I became a director at such a young age. But these two fine gentlemen then set up the first discount house owned by indigenous black Zimbabweans. And to be quite honest, initially I thought I would join them because that was the easiest route to actually making money, by joining somebody who had taken the risk. But then they wouldn't have me. They had a full house. Then the next thing is the next lot of guys. There was a group of rival discount house guys, the Nevamhlangas of this world. They then left the discount company of Zimbabwe and set up their own discount house. And again, I knocked on their door and they wouldn't have me. And so I figured, well, if they won't have me, then after this entrepreneurial school, let me write a business plan of starting our very own discount house, stockbroking company, and asset management company. So I diversified a little from what they had done in order to make sure that our revenue streams would be very different in case the discount house market was overcrowded. And so the first company we set up was a stockbroking company, which was led by one of my founding partners, Solomon Mgavazi. And automatically we were able to start our kingdom empire. And we literally called it Kingdom Securities, primarily because I had just become a born-again Christian, and Matthew 6, verse 33 happened to be my favorite scripture, which says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." I must say, the part I liked about that scripture initially was, "All these things shall be added unto you." And so that motivated me to become an entrepreneur. With God on my side, all the blessings would come to me. And so we called it Kingdom. We then, in November 1994, began putting together a business plan for a discount house. I had another partner who had worked with me at Bard, Frankie Kufa, and between him and I, we wrote the discount house plan. And it was fairly easy to do that, following the entrepreneurial school that I had attended. We wrote down the plan for the discount house, and then went on to write a plan for an asset management company. And again, this is an area I had dabbled in, and there were a few high net worth individuals and pension funds that promised that if we launched our own company, they would come along with us. And come along they did. We had the support of First Mutual Life at the time, a guy called Don Edgerton, who supported our vision, which we sold to him. And then we had our first institutional investor, Zimnat Life Assurance Company, where Mrs. Rachel Kupara took a punt on us. She believed in our vision, and she invested in our vision. I, interestingly, had sold our family home. I didn't want to work for people without having a stake in the business. And so I persuaded my sweetheart that we could make a fortune. And if we sold our family home, we would be owners in this discount house operation. And I promised her that the first dividends that I would receive, which I estimated would be millions, would actually go towards us acquiring a house of our dreams. It wasn't an easy move. It meant that we left our Eastleigh home and went back to live with my parents in Highfields, so that we would have the capital to actually put into the business. But as a Christian, all the proceeds, we elected that 10% of all the assets, the house, the cars that we had sold in order to go back to Highfields, we committed that 10% of that capital would actually go to the Lord. And therefore we could justifiably call it kingdom, because God would be with us. And so we sowed seed into the building of the Celebration Center. And I remember my first check was $15,000 equivalent. And that was my first seed. And as a result, because it was a big check, my pastor was so enamored that he put me on stage to make a testimony of what I intended to do. And as a faith move, I said, I'm going to start a bank. I'm going to make millions. And I remember there were some experienced bankers in the audience. They thought, what is this kid smoking? Whatever he's smoking can't be legal. I remember one banker, the MD of one of the banks at the time, called aside the pastor after the service and said, why are you allowing these kids to, publicly make a declaration that they will form a bank? Where has that ever happened? But lo and behold, we were able to start, a discount house and take it on to become an award-winning financial services group that won us many, many accolades. So in order to scale up, because we had very minimal capital, the equivalent of $500,000, we were not really strong from a capital perspective, so we couldn't grow our asset base. So having watched the movie Wall Street, we were reading around how financial institutions can capitalize themselves. And I remember reading a book called The Predator's Ball. And that book was very insightful with regards to mergers and acquisitions that one could make in order to actually build up your asset base. And so we did a dawn raid on the Discount Company of Zimbabwe, which was a listed entity on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So literally 3 years after inception, we were looking to scale up. And I then bought a book called Can the Big Eat the Small? Can the Small Eat the Big, rather? And we went on to gobble up a financial institution which was 3 to 4 times our size. And how did we do that? There are some lessons there. We were able to find the shareholders of this listed entity and persuade them that we could offer them a higher rate of return on their capital. I think the DCZ crew were thinking of building a building, and we thought, no, we won't build a building. We will build buildings after we've made that capital sweat. They weren't sweating their asset base, and that's what we elected to do. So as a quoted company, in 1998, we became a listed entity. Kingdom Securities Holdings Limited became listed. You changing the name of the discount company to KFHL, Kingdom Financial Holdings Limited. That listing put us on the spotlight because our share price became monitored by people. Our results became of interest to the public. The rate of return on capital that we were obtaining at the time was 2 to 3 times as high as some of the listed players. And we were doing fascinating things. That put us in the glare, of course, where we moved from having just, 7 shareholders. We moved on to have 2,000 shareholders. And so we had to answer to institutional clients, to individuals, and of course to us, ourselves as the major shareholders, wanting a rate of return on, on investments. At that point, we realized we couldn't just remain a discount house. We now had the wherewithal to move on and become a licensed banking franchise holder. And our strategy was simple. We would apply for bank licenses or acquire bank licenses through mergers and acquisitions. And so we did a series of mergers and acquisitions, both locally in Zimbabwe and regionally. And that made us a very exciting target for investors. And at the time, I caught the eye of none other than John Moxon. John was running his Meikles empire, and I happened to write on the back page of the Financial Gazette that John had a lot of capital that he had raised on the London Stock Exchange, but he wasn't necessarily sweating that capital. And so in that vein, a very irritable John called me and said, "How dare you write such a nasty article about me? Why don't you come over for a cup of Tanganda tea, at his offices?" So I went across very reluctantly and terrified at what John would have to say to me, and I asked him to explain his business model. So in the process, I then discovered that John had an interest in banking. And he said, so how are you sweating the capital? So we then began to exchange ideas of what I could do with the capital that he was holding. And that conversation and that cup of tea led to a 25% purchase of Kingdom shares by none other than the Meikles Group. And the way in which we wanted that capital deployed was we did a rights issue, which essentially Meikles underwrote, and they were able to acquire 25% shareholding in our company. So with this big, recognizable shareholder, we continue to grow our portfolio. We then pioneered in-store banking, and that was very exciting for John because they had a credit book within Meikles, and so we were able to combine our strengths. We were able to roll out our bank. You know, we applied for a commercial bank license, and we didn't have to build banking halls. We were literally using the tills, you know, within his supermarkets to roll out a bank. In that process, we were able to look at the whole service offering of banks. And we realized that because we would be in conjunction with the supermarket or a departmental store, we had to offer prompt service to customers. We then introduced a card that could be issued within 20 minutes. So whilst the customer did shopping, we could issue them a bank card. That swelled our clientele. From a mere 8,000 clients, we were literally 20, 30, 50,000. We became the fastest growing bank through that in-store banking model. And as they would say, we smashed records in terms of earnings. We whipped the other banks in terms of performance and growth. And we became the top company on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange in the year 2001. Because obviously these comparative analyses are made, and we were the top performer. And during those inaugural 7 years, I literally won every business award that was ever issued in Zimbabwe except Miner of the Year, Farmer of the Year, or Manufacturer of the Year. So the key lessons of the first explosive years of Kingdom Financial Holdings. I think number one, we hired a young team. Number two, we enthused them with a motivational leadership approach. We basically identified their personal goals and we married them off to the organizational goals. And that within itself created a high performance strategy for remuneration. So we paid out handsome bonuses for performance. That was a good lesson. The next lesson was to be always watching the next curve, the next opportunity, and exploring it both internally within Zimbabwe and also regionally. And in the region, we were able to pick out a group of underperforming players and merge with them. So we did that in Zambia, for example. We bought an underperforming bank, we restructured it, it became Invest Trust, we listed it, we made $1 million US dollars and sold our shares. We moved on to Malawi. We replicated the same model of what had succeeded in Zimbabwe. Started with a stockbroking company, moved to a discount house, to a commercial bank, asset management company, and again began to sweat the capital. Those are all lessons. Again, we had a lot of leadership development material. We deployed SMI, LMI within the youngsters. They were very energetic, and that enabled us to earn significant profits, which we were able to plow back into Zimbabwe, open an office in London, offering financial services, and then come back again into Botswana. And so that was a period of phenomenal growth, but there were also some tough lessons. In certain instances, we moved into commercial banking and lending. Now, this wasn't our forte, and we got burnt in that regard in terms of non-performing loans. And pretty soon we realized that within and amongst us, we really had no commercial banking experience. And so we went onto the market and we hired a team that was ex-Barclays Bank. And we brought in the likes of Mark Wood, into the franchise. We brought in 3 top executives. And we literally took a back seat as shareholders and we let them run the show. They cleaned up our act in the commercial banking arena. They brought us their wealth of wisdom and experience. We then broadened our portfolio, went into leasing as a branch of what we did. And so that was an exciting phase in our life. So come the year 2001, I had a run-in with the authorities. And essentially I got arrested twice on what I thought were frivolous, allegations of malpractice within the banking arena. I became a high risk to the organization because of the politics of Zimbabwe, and I was promoted upstairs to become deputy chairman of my group. But in reality, I was fired from my executive position. And so I wondered what I would do. And during the inaugural 7 years of Kingdom, I had personally been involved in mentoring and coaching. I had personally also been exposed to global leadership training through Harvard University, Oxford University, the Haggai Institute of Leadership, the Pacific Institute of Leadership in the United States. And I had taken a liking to transferring the knowledge and wisdom that I had accumulated to the younger people. And so I decided that probably the best franchise and the best faculty that I could join in the whole wide world was that of SMI. So I approached the founder, Paul J. Meyer, in Waco, Texas, to acquire his franchise and grow it on the African continent. Paul agreed to that, and that became my hobby horse. And that's now my passion. So essentially, I knew that with my experience in management, in leadership, as an entrepreneur, I had a lot to give out in terms of practical knowledge and experience. And then the marvel of this was that we had a research institute in Waco that was studying exclusively the most successful people in the world, putting those nuggets together and packaging them in a box. And so we call that dynamite in a box. And I figured if I bought this franchise, I wouldn't have to go through the hoops of learning how to actually put together an institute of my own. And so that acquisition allowed me from 2001 to then begin to buy lock, stock, and barrel. There were 10, facilitators already in that business, and I became the 11th one. And so we were able to roll out that business. That business operated in the whole of Southern Africa. And to date, we've mentored and coached over 6,000 individuals. within over 500 organizations. And if ever there is a way of learning how to start a business, I would say buy a franchise. I did just that. And as a result, I also sell the licenses of SMI, LMI. And if ever anybody thought of, wanting to join me and join our faculty, we're open to that. Indeed, if you're going to lead people, the first person you must learn to lead is leading yourself. And I was privileged in learning that you lead yourself through the wheel of life, or you become the total leader through the SMI, LMI wheel of life. In that respect, there are 6 spokes of the wheel that one is expected to set up personal goals for. They say success is the progressive realization of worthwhile, predetermined personal goals. And those goals are in 6 areas. Number 1, you're spiritual and ethical. You must be clear about that. Number 2, your physical and health. Again, you must have goals for that. Number 3, your mental and education. What are your goals in that particular area? Number 4, your social and cultural issues. Again, you must define for yourself what you want to achieve, within that particular area. And then we move on to your financial and career. Again, if you define explicitly what you want to achieve in that area, then you've got the totality of who you are. So once you define those things, those goals, and what is a goal? A goal is a dream with a deadline. So you must be leading yourself to achieve your personal goals. And if you are able to do that, then you can begin to dabble with organizational goals, national goals, and then be able to bring yourself and see whether there is a match or whether there is a resonance between your personal goals, the organization's goals, or indeed the national goals. And in that area, within my social and cultural arena, I always look at the C's. I want to influence my community. I want to influence my city. I want to influence my cell, the people around me. I want to influence my country, and I want to influence the African continent, because I believe we can as Africans. So those C's are then, blended with my own personal wheel of life. And if I'm able to blend my wheel of life, I can have commonality with either my cell members, my church members, my community members, my city members, my countrymen, and indeed my continent. So indeed, Zimbabwe is the epitome of what they would call a perfect storm, a VUCA economy, volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. Now, how does one get to lead in such an environment? I would think that it is imperative that we can acknowledge what we can change and what we can't change. And within the vortex that is called Zimbabwe, there are certain things and certain levers that we can pull. And I think it is imperative for anybody to define what those levers are for yourself and for the organization that you lead. Then, outside of that, for example, the politics, which is at the heart of the complexities that we have in the country that we call Zimbabwe. All we can do is to either join the politicians and become politicians ourselves and change the trajectory of our beloved nation, or else become centers of influence in terms of the policy making with regards to our own destinies. That, I think, is all that we can do. We can become the change that we want to see. If you believe you have the force of character, you've got the persuasive ability, you become an influencer. And I believe I am that, because I do participate as the president of the Zimbabwe Economic Society. I debate issues such as the budget, the budget statement, the monetary policy statement. I've got to be part of the architecture of that particular endeavor. Otherwise, we are left, in terms of our destinies, we are leaving our destinies in the hands of politicians. Okay, talking of books, I think for Zimbabweans in particular, this is a must read. It speaks here, it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. This is a book by Jason Jennings and Lawrence Horton. This is a must-read book because I think many of us are kind of small-minded in our outlook, but we need to think big. And this book will teach you to think big and also to think what is possible. So that's the first one I'll give you. Another favorite of mine is a book called Outliers. And The Outliers is a book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a great book. You don't want to be ordinary. I think all of us have that aspiration to be extraordinary, to be an outlier. I'm quite well known for saying, see you at the top, the bottom is overcrowded, implying there is mediocrity at the bottom. And a book such as this will actually propel you to the top. If this doesn't do it, I don't know what else will. And then this is a book that I picked up early in my life. It's called Halftime by Bob Buffett. This book fascinates me because many of us as executives are actually not sure what we're going to do on the other side. And so this speaks of the last half of your life. And it was when I read this book that I felt the compulsion that I wasn't just an investment banker. I was going to be a success coach, and that would be totally satisfactory for the rest of my life. So indeed, I am one of those businessmen that is unashamed about my faith. And I do so because I am a proud Christian. I mean, where I was and where I would be without Jesus Christ in my life would be a pittance to the man that I am today. So I am the man that I am today because of my faith. The number one book for me, therefore, as a Christian, is the Bible. It is my reference point. It is my daily bread, literally, because I literally am on a daily Bible reading program. So I touch my favorite book each and every day. And as evidence of that, if you follow me on social media, any of my handles will have a scripture of the day. And that goes to show that I've read my Bible, and that particular verse was the most touching verse for me. And I post it on social media.
Thank you for watching this masterclass. So many lessons to learn from that masterclass, like make bold moves in business to realize your dreams, and particularly be the change that you want to see in society. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. Until next time, cheers to you all.